It is Legends territory. We've got Todd Frazier for this week's episode for a very good reason. And thank you to our MLB Players Alumni Association fam for setting up the best former player interviews out there. And check out baseballalumni.com for more info on your favorite former players. Quick reminder, if you're watching on YouTube right now, this is available on podcast form, Apple, Spotify. Check it out. Now let's bring in the next legend. 16 years in the bigs, mostly with the Reds, all-star, Gold Glove winner, part of one of the most epic teams in baseball history, the 2004 World Series winning Boston Red Sox squad. And most importantly, your teammate, 2011, 12, and 13. You want to bring them on?
Yeah, the big man, Bronson Arroyo. What's up, brother?
What's going on, fellas?
Nothing, man. Just hanging, man. Thanks for coming out here, man. Everything well with you? How's the singing going?
Yeah, we had a show last night. It's been good, man. I put a record out in February, but mostly around Cincinnati, just playing cover songs, a bunch of Pearl Jam stuff and Nirvana, a couple times a month. But it keeps my voice in shape, gets me out there, getting those butterflies like you used to before you play a big league game, listening to the national anthem. So it's a grind, and but it's fun.
Did you bring a prop?
A guitar, you mean?
Yes. Your best friend. Yeah.
There's always a guitar sitting next to me in my basement, man. I come down here to workshop new songs, about an hour and a half every single day. So it's always sitting next to me.
You should have seen a little early. He was actually playing a little music for us before the show. A little warm. So he warms up and everything he does. Like when we're in the locker room, he's hanging in there in the corner. All of a sudden, we're like, for our last 10 games or whatever. He's playing the guitar. Right, gets us back in the mood a little bit, and we start going on a run.
Yeah, for sure. I'm still going down there now every once in a while in the Reds locker room and playing some music. It's for me, it's a nice outlet to just be able to sing. But also, it's not that often that you get to see a guy inside of a locker room, man, sitting outside the shower while guys are getting prepped for a game. Being able to rip off a bunch of songs with an acoustic guitar and kind of feel the energy and the liveness of the music right in front of your face. So it can be fun sometimes.
Bronson, let's talk about this leg kick that you had. How did you develop that at such a young age? Was that a high school thing? Was that a college thing? Or pros, like when was the first time you said, you know what, I'm going to keep that leg straight, kind of manipulate the batters a little bit?
It started when I was a kid. It was, I grew up down in the Keys. My father and my mother on both sides of the family were from Key West, Florida, and kind of a real isolated place. And for some reason, we had a satellite dish in the mid 80s and we were catching all the Mets games. And 84, 85, Dwight Gooden was an absolute stud with the New York Mets. And he had kind of this high leg kick. And that was right around the time that I started, transitioning from T-ball to pitch, 7, 8, 9 years old and what they call the minors down there. And it was just kind of what my childhood mind morphed out of Dwight Gooden's mechanics. And I didn't really realize that my leg kick was a bit different than other people until we started watching ourselves back on film in the minor leagues. Because, in high school, you're not filming yourself. And if you are, you're definitely not like going home and popping the tape in, at least back in those days, and watching it. So I didn't really know that I was unorthodox until they started talking to me about it in the minor leagues. And then, there was a couple of coaches who tried to take it away from me, thinking that it was going to be a problem throwing strikes. But once they realized that I could still command the strike zone with that type of a leg kick, then they kind of left me alone.
That's pretty cool. And now I'm going to bring it back even further. When you were younger, I remember you showing me the videos of you as probably 5'6". I don't know exact terms, but you were lifting heavy weights. And at that young age, I remember you and your dad in the garage getting after it. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it was a unique upbringing, and it's weird because now since I put this record out, I was trying to get on the Joe Rogan show, and I know he likes lifting and stuff, and so I put this little tape together for the publicist, and I started researching to see if there was anybody in modern day who pushed more weight than me, and I started looking up all the kids' records, and still to this day, I can't find anybody who's even in the same universe with me. So on this one tape I have, and I'm glad my father finally filmed it, because if I didn't have this tape, no one would believe this. But I'm 8 years old. It's 1985. And I'm maxing out on squat, bench, and deadlift. We would do that about twice a year in between playing sports. And, when you're a little kid or any time when you're maxing out, you're only making 5, 10-pound gains, every 6 months because you're pushing to the extreme. But I'm 8 years old. I weigh about 60 pounds. I squat 255. I deadlift 235 and bench 130. And what I found in the archives from records of 2023 are kids, the weight that they are pushing I'm pushing more weight than them in my warm-up sets. And, it's
Wow.
strange to look back and watch myself on video like that, because for me, it felt normal then, but watching it back now, it seems totally abnormal when you're hanging out with an 8-year-old and you realize like putting 250 pounds on any 8-year-old's back seems impossible. But it was just something we started as a very young age. I threw a baseball across the infield when I was, 5. I had never played catch with my father, and it looked like a 12-year-old had been playing for a few years. And so he just thought, let me put him in the weight room and at least get him a free education in college. And him and his friends had already had this from the 1970s, this crew of guys who were powerlifting, and they were squat, bench, and deadlift. And they were, these guys were pushing, 700 pound squats, and same thing with the deadlift and benching, and, in the mid 400s. And so it felt natural to us, but looking back on it on video, it's very odd.
Did you think you were going to be a professional power lifter and not a Major League Baseball player?
No, it was always tailored for the baseball. My father was not a baseball guy, even though he was born in Cuba. But he just knew that if I was a little stronger, it was probably going to give me the ability to be a better athlete. And this was in a time, when parents were constantly telling my father that you're going to stunt his growth, and, what are you doing? And he just was a little bit ahead of the curve. He was taking me to get massages when I was a young kid. I was going to the chiropractor. There was things that he was already mixing in that made sense to him, just from kind of like a 2 and 2 = 4 mentality. And as I got into minor league baseball, even some of these things were looked at upon as like taboo, and then years later you find that, hey, every major league locker room has a chiropractor, every major league locker room has guys who are getting IVs, and there's a nap room and all these things. And he just he turned my brain on for strategy in that way, to kind of like pick up all the pieces of the puzzle, to build kind of, a full career. And it took a long time for the game to actually catch up to that mentality. And nowadays you see that, you ask, why are athletes throwing so much harder now? It's because they're doing all the things that I was doing as a kid, but they have bigger and stronger bodies by birth.
100%. And I couldn't agree with you anymore, because now you see these guys pitching and all of a sudden they're like doing crow hops and throwing the ball as hard as they can into the net. Like, do you see all this stuff these guys are doing now just to get bigger and stronger? And it's like you were kind of like the Kickstarter of this whole thing that nobody really even knew about,
Yeah, and it was a bit of a confidence thing for me. I mean, Kurt Schilling told me in 2004, when he didn't really know me in spring training, he said I was too thin to throw 230 innings. And, 06, I throw 240 innings. And part of my ego, or really all of my ego in the game, lied in throwing in 200 innings and finding a way to stay healthy. But people didn't know what I had been doing for my whole childhood, when other kids were just out playing and they were throwing on their uniform last minute to go to the ballpark. I was carbo loading a couple nights before. I was taking supplements. I was living a lifestyle of a Major League Baseball player because of what we were doing in the weight room. And, other people weren't privy to that. And so it not only made me physically strong, but it made me mentally strong to deal with the grind of 162 games in spring training and everything that comes along with the dog days of summer. And if you look at the second halves of a lot of my seasons, in August and September, I would have really good numbers most of the time, because I wasn't mentally burned out like a lot of guys would be early on in their career, like a Johnny Cueto, who was thinking, man, I just can't wait to get back to the Dominican and have a beer on the beach. I was thinking, I'm going to win 4 more games here in the back half of the season.
Now, was it mostly lower body? Because you're not, Mark McGuire, Jose Canseco here with
Right.
the upper body. And also, I would guess for years that was not the move for you anyway, because you want to maintain your flexibility with your upper half, right?
Yeah, I was just I was fortunate that I'm kind of a long, lanky guy who's just loose by nature. So, that one part of it was that I really wasn't going to have a body. I'm 6'4", 152 when I graduated high school. So there was no way to really blow that body up unless you were going to eat twice as many calories and be in the gym 3 times a day, like an Arnold Schwarzenegger, and we weren't lifting that way. We were lifting low reps, heavy weight. So we would never be doing more than 6s. So there was never a time when I was doing 10s and 12s and 15s on squats or even bench. So because you were doing a small amount of reps, you weren't getting that huge swell. You weren't getting that real blood-filled pump that you want when you're going to the beach and you look good. You were just feeling really strong. And so I had this tiny, skinny little body. I was always the skinniest guy on the team. But underneath that, I was housing this type of strength that was extraordinary. I can remember being like in 7th grade and talking or doing something, in PE and having a coach say, "Hey man, give me 25 push-ups," like it was like like a real harsh thing he was putting on me. And I did those 25 push-ups, and I could see the look on his face was like, what was that? Because back then I could do 25 push-ups almost like I was just doing them in the air. I weighed, 55, 60 pounds, maybe 70 pounds. And to push, that body weight was very, very easily. And so, it was something that we were working on just to be strong. And my father just deduced that should help me in some way down the line.
Now, I want to, that's a cool story. I just want everybody to know about that. I thought that was one of the cooler things I've seen on your flip phone. You still have that flip phone or what? You've had that for like 30 years probably now.
No. Yeah, the flip phone, man. The flip phone was it was an evolution. I got rid of it in 2018. I got stuck in, after I retired, I got stuck in Brazil seeing a Pearl Jam show. And their tour manager said, hey, right, this is one of these shows that as soon as the show's over, we're running out the back door and off. So we get in front of these 60,000 people coming out of the stadium. And I missed the tunnel to where the bus was leaving. So I got stuck at the stadium with a flip phone, and it didn't have any directions on it, no way to call an Uber, and they're speaking Portuguese. So it was kind of gnarly, and I was thinking, I need to get on the network. So I finally got rid of it. But, that was a thing that started because, around 2006, we got these flip phones that came out, and when the iPhone hit, I just loved my flip phone. And as years went on, though, it became something that was a nice conversation piece for me to have with some younger guys, and to look at an older veteran in the locker room who was living a bit of a simple life, maybe ride his bicycle to the park once in a while and wasn't spending a ton of money on watches and shoes. And to see that flip phone was a nice conversation starter for the fact that, you're going to make a lot of money while you're playing the game, but you better house it away, because one day we're not going to be able to work deep into our career. If you're a doctor, you're a lawyer, you can make money until you're 70 years old. But as an athlete, by the time you're 35, you're probably hitting the wall. And so I kept it all those years just for the simplicity of that and to have those conversation pieces.
Really, really cool. Really cool. So 2004 Red Sox for you guys, going down 3-0, coming back. For me, I went to game 6 and game 7 in the bleachers. It was a long story short. I bought the wrong tickets for games. I bought game 7 tickets, went there game 6. Somebody saw me pissed off. I was cursing up the world. So that guy said, give me $75. You go in the bleachers. Went back to back. And all of a sudden you guys get on that epic run. You got A-Rod swatting the ball out of your hand. And that kind of kickstart. I'm out there in that outfield like, what the heck just happened? Those are kind of craziness that went on. Talk about 2004 a little bit and the stories and the shilling and all that kind of good stuff you guys had in that whole crazy run.
Yeah, it was a buildup of 2 years. I'd come from Pittsburgh. I've been in that organization for 8 years, not knowing the culture was different in other organizations. And so when I got picked up off the waiver wire by Theo Epstein just prior to the 2003 season started, I went into that camp, in Red Sox camp in Fort Myers, and it was the first time I'd been with the new team. And it was kind of like learning, the way that they kind of operated, and realizing that, like I said, the culture of different ball teams was different. And really quickly, I realized I was in a place that was geared towards winning. And when I was with Pittsburgh, in a lot of ways, I mean, they would say stuff back in the old days like, we're going to have the best in shape staff. We don't care if we lose 100 games. You guys are going to be in great running shape. And when I got to Boston, I realized that there was another way to slice the pie. And it was like, no, this is all about winning baseball games. And we don't care if you're in shape or not, as long as you can pitch. And so I really enjoyed that mentality. But 2003, we obviously get beat in Yankee Stadium by Aaron Boone's home run off Tim Wakefield in extra innings in game 7. And that's, a whole deal onto itself. And then you come back 2004, we pick up Kurt Schilling, and we've got T-shirts that say this is the year, and the Cowboy Up stuff starts, and we got a crazy locker room, man. I mean, Kevin Millar was really the ringmaster there, who was just kind of making guys like Manny Ramirez and David Ortiz come out of their shell and realize they could be who they wanted to be inside that locker room as long as we played the game hard. And it was really the wildest locker room I've ever been around, hands down. I mean, between Pedro Martinez and Derek Lowe, Nomar was there early on in that season, but you got Johnny Damon. I mean, it was just a man's team, man. I mean, Jason Varitek was the captain. It was an all-star club, and I was just fortunate to be kind of flying under the radar, trying to put up quality starts every 5th day at age 27 and 28. And so by the time we got to the playoffs in 2004, it felt like, this was the year we're going to do this. And then we blink and we find ourselves down 3-0 to the Yankees. And it looks like, wow, we're going to get beat again this season. And then obviously game 4, game 5, Ortiz pulls those off in extra innings, by winning the game with a home run and then a blooper into center. And then we get to game 6, where you're in the house, Todd. And yeah, after A-Rod knocks that ball out of my hand, I mean, you remember the riot crew came out on the field and they were throwing batteries and stuff onto the field. And and beer bottles, and just it was almost like it felt like a war zone in a lot of ways. I'd never been in that type of environment before, but it made me realize that I could pitch anywhere, anytime, any place, and it's part of the reason why when I got to Cincinnati in '06, I really had a great season that first year, because I almost felt like pitching in the National League was a little bit of there was kind of a weak link there, because not only did you have the pitcher hitting in the 9 hole, but I didn't have guys like Jorge Posada hitting in the 8 hole, dropping 25 homers in a season. So the lineups felt like there was a little bit more breathing room.
Did you throw a battery?
I did not. I was rooting for the Red Sox at the time. I was like, you know what? This can be an epic comeback here. This can be one for the ages. So I knew I was going to play with them. Isn't that weird? I was in college now.
Yeah, of course.
I'm just
Thought
kidding.
you were going to play with the Yanks?
No, for Bronson.
Oh, with Bronson. You were like, yo, I'm rooting for my teammate, man.
I already knew ahead of time.
Yep.
I knew this is my teammate coming up.
See you in 10 years, dude. When you say I'd never seen, an atmosphere like that, what was it? Were there particular instances where you'd be like, that does not occur anywhere else but right here?
Yeah, you just had, you'd never been in a locker room where there was so many great players who also had quirky, things about them. I mean, there was some times when Pedro was, coming to the ballpark at 5:30 for a regular game, and I'd never seen anybody come that late and nobody even blink an eye at it. And then I looked up his stats, and it was like 104 wins, 30 losses in a Red Sox uniform, and you're like, okay, I get it. And then, there were days that he'd be cussing out the media and telling them, don't talk to me for the next month. You make your money, I'll make mine. And then other times he'd be in a great mood and just be running around butt naked. Manny was one of the quirkiest guys I've ever played with. I mean, I would take a nap before every game. Todd probably knows, about 5:30 to 6 o'clock, I'd take a nap for a 7 o'clock game. I'd wake up sometimes and Manny would be spooning me, just sleeping behind me. It was just a crazy locker room, man. I mean, Derek Lowe was super ADD running around. We had Curtis Laskanik, man, who had 2 screws loose. Kevin Millard was screaming at Terry Francona and Theo Epstein every day about, 6:40 before the game started. The music's playing. He's taping up. He's treating them like he's his kid. Just hollering and screaming at him. It was just a locker room that was just like, there was so many guys you couldn't control because they were great ball players. Johnny Damon is like doing naked pull-ups. I'm saying 7 minutes before the national anthem, and then you just blink and he's out on the field and he opens up the game with a triple. And you're like, dude, I don't even think this guy's wearing underwear for the game today.
That's
so
awesome.
It's like, it was just a locker room of guys, man, who just had character and charisma. And we knew we were good. And Kevin made it okay to do anything and say anything. So it was just, Pedro later in that season had brought the smallest man in the world named Nelson from the Dominican Republic. And he was running around the locker room cussing everybody out in Spanish. And I remember Jack McCormick, the traveling secretary, looked over at me. I was putting my tickets in. And he goes, Bronson, he's like, what is that bird doing on that chair over there? And I said, that's not a bird, man. That's Nelson, the smallest man in the world. But he was so little sitting on his lazy boy chair that he looked like a bird to Jack, because he was like, Jack was getting up in age. But just a locker room that felt like a circus half the time. And then, you'd go out there and play quality baseball and beat teams down. And then you get back on the bus and Kevin would be on the microphone just getting after it again.
Did you feel like the team was ahead of its time in the way that they were able to be themselves? It's really only in the last, 10 years or so that rookies can come up and say, yeah, I'm not just going to be hazed all the time. I can do what I want. I can even try and command a clubhouse. I can flip bats. I can be myself personality-wise, even if I am quirky or crazy. So do you feel like that team was an outlier, but also you're seeing more of that nowadays?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was, I came up in that Pirate organization, and man, people like laugh at me now when I say for 3 years I got dressed up. For 3 years, I was like eating my food in my locker, not saying a word to anybody. I mean, they treated you like a rookie in the early 2000s until you got through arbitration. Now they consider you a veteran after you've had 100 days in the big leagues, and so it was a totally different dynamic. And that team, I believe, was an outlier. Like you said, teams were much tighter, much quieter. You couldn't really be that loose inside of a locker room. But this team was so good, and Kevin was kind of like, was going to make it with his mouth. He was just going to be kind of like a Will Ferrell in a way, and he was just going to make it okay for guys to kind of do and say anything. And you found that when Schilling came over, we heard stories like, don't talk to Schilling or Randy Johnson the day they pitch. And so when spring training started in '04, you saw that where nobody was speaking to Kurt. You couldn't say hi to him on the day he pitched. And then about a month into the season, if you walked in our locker room, he was sitting there playing cards with the guys the day he pitched, because Kevin was so vocal about, Kevin's the type of guy who would call you out in front of the whole team and be riding you in a funny way, and you couldn't combat him because he was so witty that, he'd be calling Schilling out, like, on the day he pitched in front of everyone. And then eventually you just realize, like, hey, I'm going to relax inside this locker room. There's going to be a lot of crazy stuff going on, but when we go out on the field, we'll be serious and we'll play the game the right way.
That's funny because you really think like the leader in the clubhouse, like it's a pitcher or a catcher. Like what I would think, my question would be, how about like Jason Varitek? Was he a vocal guy? Was he a guy? Because he's the one that got in that big brawl with, you threw the pitch at A-Rod. That's what I want to ask, like, about this whole thing. Was Varitek a leader? And my next question, was that pitch thrown on purpose to hit A-Rod? Like, what was the whole saga going on over there?
Yeah, well, I mean, Jason was the true captain of the team. I mean, when we went into pitching meetings, he was more buttoned up than any catcher I've ever been around in the game, hands down. When I was with the Pirates, we had Jason Kendall as a catcher, and sometimes, he would just kind of sit on the floor and listen in the meetings as everyone else did. But Jason would have, he'd have an encyclopedia-size notebook, and he would be kind of commanding the pitching meeting. And he was a guy that out on the field was so flexible. He told me, I don't care what you throw, Bronson. You can kick the ball to me as long as we get 3 outs. And that openness and that freeness that he gave me out on the mound really made me feel comfortable, especially coming to the Red Sox, at such a young age in a lot of ways. But he was really kind of a quiet leader in a lot of ways. Jason, if he had to say something, he would. But he was the guy that if you were going to the mountaintop and you wanted somebody that you knew needed to try to kill a grizzly bear with a pocket knife, I was taking Jason Varitek. And so he wasn't the most vocal guy, but he was this underlying strength that he brought to the clubhouse, that you knew that when, if the shit was going to hit the fan, that he was going to be there for the war. And that's what you saw that day with Alex was, there was no intent there at all on my part. I've heard through the grapevine that Alex was a big video watcher, and I didn't pitch inside at the time a lot. I was getting away with a lot of breaking balls on the outer half and fastballs on the outer half because the American League didn't know me a whole bunch, coming from the National League for a while. And so with Alex, everybody knew he had a kind of a hole on the inner half, and he loved to drive the ball to right center. So that day I just went inside, and I was just doubling up inside, which is one of the things you constantly hear in your career, which is you got to double up inside to be successful. And so I was just going in there with a sinker. It was, 87 miles an hour, just got away from me, trying to stay in there and hit him on the elbow pad. And he got irritated. And there was a lot going on between those two teams, even if you take away Alex Rodriguez. But he obviously is a guy who could be a bit of a lightning rod for a team. He looked like he was very cocky and brash the way he played the game. He was also very good. And also inside that rivalry, I mean, there was fights going on in the clubhouse. I mean, out in the stands constantly. I mean, in 2003, you got to remember that game when Don Zimmer gets thrown down by Pedro Martinez. That same game, Kareem Garcia in right field jumps over the wall, and him and Jeff Nelson fight one of our security guards in the bullpen in the middle of that playoff game. I mean, it's like pandemonium. And so every time we got together, it was you just needed a match to be lit, man, and something was going to blow up, and that's just what happened that day.
Yeah, that must have been really exciting. Now, just a quick question here about, like, after the whole thing, have you and A-Rod ever talked about the whole situation, let bygones be bygones, something like that?
Never have run across Alex. It's funny. We have traveled in the same circles a bit, where I've run into somebody who he's run into, and Julian Tavares. I played a little surprise show in Boston when I put that record out in February, and somebody bear hugged me from behind, and it was Julian Tavares. And Julian said he hangs out with him all the time, and he said, "Hey, Alex," he kept saying, "Alex doesn't hate you, man. He wants to hang out and have lunch." And I'd love to sit down and talk with Alex, because from Matt Krause, who as our strength coach with the Reds for many, many years, he was over with the Yankees. And he said Alex is one of the greatest baseball minds he's ever been around, just absolutely loves the game and is almost like a baseball nerd in a way. And I think you see that on TV. I mean, I think what he does on air is pretty special. And but I've never got to have a conversation with him.
Wow. Okay, I want to take you to the Cincinnati Reds current squad, because going back towards the beginning of the interview, you said you still play music for the team sometimes. So you'll still pop by, like, even have you done that this year in 2023?
Yeah, I've been in there. I've been in there a couple of times, and played some music for the guys, and I'll just kind of randomly stop down. I think I'm going to come down in the next few weeks and plug this little speaker I get in. Yeah, I'll just play for the guys sometimes. I used to do it when I was with Todd all the time, but it's a whole new generation, and nobody in that locker room really knows me except for Joey Votto. But I'm going into the Reds Hall of Fame this year. And it's just nice to be connected with a ball club in a way. You know, if you play 3 or 4 years with a team, you might not be able to do what I've done, but playing 9 seasons and going into their Hall of Fame and being really good to the clubhouse guys over the years allows me to kind of walk in that door in a way that like I'm still an active player. And I know that's unusual, but it feels good to have a place to kind of call home like that.
Are you going to go up to Ellie De La Cruz and be like, dude, I can squat more than you?
No, I just tell him I could squat more than you when I was 8. when I showed that tape to Gabe Kapler, he was running the Dodgers minor league system at the time, 2015. I was hurt for the first time. And when I showed Gabe that, because he absolutely loves lifting weights, I've watched him send out emails in the middle of squatting and deadlifting 400 pounds while he was 45 years old. And his jaw was on the ground. And he was like, can you still push this kind of weight? And I'm like, no way, man. I don't even want to put 250 pounds on my back now, much less, you know, something equivalent to 4 times my body weight.
I want to talk about the new rule changes here in baseball, especially the sticky stuff. You've seen guys pretty much getting caught for having rosin on their hand, a little too much rosin. Can we go back to when I played with you for the 3 years? You would go back into your little corner after each inning, and the concoction you had there in front of you. How many games would you think you'd be getting for this concoction you had down there?
Oh, man, that science project I had going, they might have kicked me out of the game for good. They would have me right next to Pete Rose.
Exactly.
You know, where that whole thing started, I've been saying forever, the league just needs to take the baseballs and rub them up with the mud and then add a little bit of pine tar and a little tack to them. And now they're finally coming around to finding a pre-tacked baseball. And, you know, people don't realize how hard it is and how different it is. The baseball at the big league level is different than in the minor league level. And in the minor league level, they use the ball over and over and over again. At the big league level, as soon as it touches the ground, they throw it out. So you're constantly getting a baseball thrown to you from the umpire that has kind of a powdery substance on the outside of it, which is the mud they rub balls up with. But when it dries, it turns almost like baby powder. You take that to a young rookie who's then maybe pitching in September or October, you know, in Yankee Stadium, and the wind's whipping and there's no humidity. It feels like you're throwing a cue ball off a pool table with baby powder on it. There is no way to command that pitch. And so for me, early on in my career, I figured out that if I could just get a little pine tar on the ball and just rub it around and make it tacky and fix the ball, then I wouldn't have to deal with it so much. And so, you know, without having some sort of a grip on the ball, there's no way to be effective, especially for a guy like me who's throwing, you know, 87 to 89. On a good day, I'm touching 90. I needed to be able to spin the ball for strikes. And so, you know, you just had to find ways to do it. And I would sit down in that little corner, and I had this concoction, which was I would clean my hand from all that black stuff off the ball. I would clean my hand without rubbing alcohol, and then put a little rosin on it. And then I would just take pine tar and put it on my left hand in my glove. And I would just tap the ball and just rub it and get a little stickiness on it. And it wasn't allowing me to do anything I shouldn't be able to do. It was just basically fixing the ball in a way. And, you know, they've been opposed to that for such a long time in baseball, but I think they're going to finally get to it, because it's just a waste of time to have guys out there who have all kinds of weird stuff on their neck and all over the place trying to figure out how to get a grip on a baseball that you should have a grip on anyway.
Yeah, but you forgot the couple other things. You had your fruit there too as well. You had your banana. I think you had an apple. Wasn't there some kind of food there too as well?
Yeah, I'd usually have a banana. I'd have some applesauce. A lot of the stuff I picked up in Boston. I also had like a caffeine drink that was this lime green, and it was this red drink that was a hydration drink. And both of those came from a company that Kurt Schilling actually introduced the Red Sox to. A lot of that year in 2004, I'd have my friends say, "What is that red drink you guys are always drinking in the dugout?" And they would actually mix that drink for the whole dugout in each water bottle for the Red Sox, and it was like a hydration drink. But yeah, I had this whole thing going on, and part of being off the bench also started back in 2004. And what it was is I realized that down in the tunnel, first of all, the cameras weren't on you, right? And so you could kind of relax a little bit more, not feel like you had eyes on you. And the other thing was it was really hot outside. It was cooler in the tunnel. And if it was really cold outside, it was warmer in the tunnel. And so it was a way for me to relax, kind of get away from the game. You know, the way that I thought about pitching was not about striking guys out and being out there for 5 innings. It was about, can I make it through the 7th? You know, I was trying to get deep in ball games and pitch 200 innings year after year. And in order to do that with a guy who was only throwing in the high 80s, I felt like I had to pick up every little crumb. And part of that was to be down there and have that food and have that ability to kind of relax away from the cameras.
Yeah, that's wild. I mean, Scherzer's dealt with stuff like that with the sticky stuff earlier in the season. He's like, I swear to my kids that all I'm using is sweat and rosin. So it's been talked about a lot on our shows throughout this time. I want to ask you one more question, Reds related. What do you think about this current team? How much are you watching Cincinnati Reds ball? They've kind of taken over America's team. A lot of young guys that have developed really quickly and been good in the pros right off the jump. Does it remind you of, young Todd Frazier coming through with the club and you guys making a little run back then in 2012 was your best year
20,
as a team?
I think it was 2013.
12, well, 13 we got beat by Pittsburgh in the
Oh,
playoffs. 12 we
12.
had a chance to win the whole thing. That's when the Giants came back from 0-2
Right.
and swept us to knock us out. But those are some good teams. I'd say, I am watching a lot of Reds games these days. I've watched since I've retired. Usually I like to see the starting pitching, but this team has been, kind of a extraordinary in a way that watching the offense has been crazy exciting. I mean, we haven't had this many steals, haven't had guys who, like you said, come to the big league level, like right out of the jump and are feeling comfortable and are doing well. I think the only guy I've ever played with that I can remember doing that is maybe Mike Leake and Jonathan Papelbon, where right out of the gate, they looked like they were big leaguers. And, it's strange to have that many young guys do that all at one time. And I'm really happy for the organization because a lot of the trades they've made in the past obviously haven't panned out. And this last time they made it to the playoffs, I think in maybe 2019 before the pandemic, and getting rid of guys like Bauer and there was some guys who were in the organization for a while that, like Eugenio Suarez, and people thought, what are you doing getting rid of these guys? But, guys like McLean and like De La Cruz, I mean, they are just showing, Steer. These guys are really holding it down like they've been playing the game for 4 or 5 years. And not only are they playing well, if you watch their interviews, they know what's going on. They're not giving you a bunch of sugar-coated fluff, man. They're articulating the important things about the game and that it matters as a team. And that is hats off to the organization kind of holding the line on the current manager and the current coaching staff and their scouting staff, and really believing that they were getting some young guys in the pipeline that were going to be able to make a difference. And the city has come alive and people are in the ballpark, and it's really, really fun to be around the stadium right now for the first time really since 2013.
Do you remember in Pittsburgh? I think I brought this up to you a couple times. You and Sam LeCure were like really tight during the time in Cincinnati, and I think Sam had to start the next day. Something happened, somebody pitched too many innings, so like, all right, we need a bullpen day. And you said, Fraze, you're coming out with me tonight. And I said, all right, that's cool. I'm game, whatever. So you said, it's 5 minutes down the road. I'll meet you down in the lobby in about 30 minutes. I come down there. You got a stretch limo out there waiting just for me and you to go to the club 5 minutes away, man. We had one of the fun nights in our life. I was just flabbergasted about you getting that stretch limo. I was like, man, you know what? I need to go out with this guy more often.
Well, it's like, as you know, I mean, every team party that was ever thrown, I threw it, I paid for it. And every rookie that was dressed up, usually, I made those mixtapes on the bus, and it just felt really good. Early on in my career, I got hazed pretty heavily as a Pirate, and I kind of took the best parts of that and kind of housed it and threw away all the stuff that I thought was worthless and really detrimental to a big league ball club, to having like a gel. And so by the time I got to the Cincinnati Reds, I was a bit of a veteran coming from winning the World Series. And once kind of Griffey left and Adam Dunn left, and it was that whole group of guys like yourself, Todd, and Jay Bruce and Joey Votto and Mike Leake and Homer Bailey, I wanted to put down an atmosphere that was serious about the game, but also, was fun. And, going out at night and all the crazy stories you hear about the old timers. I mean, I wanted to test the water sometimes and see, if we could have a good time as well, but still go back to the ballpark and be serious about the game and still have winning baseball. And it was, it's part of my legacy in a way of the stories that guys will tell about how many times I went out or what you did at night on your boat or playing music somewhere in a weird place, out on the street in Chicago and people hanging out, and then also throwing 200 innings and not missing a start for almost 450 starts in a row I went in my career before I missed one. And people couldn't quite understand how I could do both. And part of it was the fact that, I was just reasonable about my schedule. It was like, yeah, maybe we went out that night, but I'm surely wasn't pitching the night after that, right? Like, I only went out nights when I knew I could go out late and stay out and still get my rest and and get my workouts in at the stadium and get your massages and all the things that come along with being a big league ball player. And I enjoyed every bit of it, man, playing hard and having a good time.
Let's finish with the album then. So it's called Some Might Say. You released it this year. And am I right that, I know you released one many, many years ago, and that was more of a cover, right? This is the first original that you've released, a full album?
Yeah. I put that cover album out in 2005, and that was just basically a collection of songs that I loved as a kid from the 90s. And then, I retired in after 2017, and I was getting the itch to see if I could write songs. I had always written, kids songs and stuff, but never written something that I thought I'd want to hear on the radio. And so I went out to LA with some guys I met in 2004. They're all New England guys. We had played many shows together for Peter Gammons and Theo Epstein's Hot Stove Cool Music in the wintertime. And these guys are all on big stages every night. My one guitar player, Jamie Aronson's out with Matchbox 20 right now, but he's normally Miley Cyrus's guitar player. And my drummer, Eric Gardner, is out with Melissa Etheridge and Tom Morello from Rage Against the Machine right now. So, it's a group of guys that I wasn't sure how far we could push it as a group because they're pretty busy, but I wanted to be able to write something original. Took some riffs from those guys, flushed through about 24 songs in a year and a half, and 10 of them made the record. We recorded it out in Silver Lake, California. And, it's been fun to play some shows. We played the 2 Innings Fest with Dave Matthews and Eddie Vedder during spring training, one in Arizona and one in Tampa. And, it's just nice to have an album that I can call my own. These stories came from my brain, and, it'll be there for the test of time. And I think probably, my great-great-grandkids or something, or my sister's kids, they'll probably pop an album in and listen to it long before they're going to break out a VCR tape from 2000 and watch Bronson pitch in a Pirate uniform. So it's nice to leave something that in the world for when I'm gone.
That's awesome, man. Good for you. You're still doing it. Proud of you, man. I had such a good time playing with you. You kind of kickstarted me to be that kind of leader and that veteran leadership to be for me, especially, not that hard-nosed guys. There was a time and place, certain guys you can, get on their tail a little bit and talk crap to, but other guys, you smooth them out, and I appreciate that. But my last thing I want to say is not many people batted 1,000 off of you, and I think I might have been one of the only people that ever bat 1,000 off you, dude. Did you know that?
I did not know that. Was that – who were you with at the time?
You were with Arizona, and we played you. I'm only
right.
2 at bats, 2 for 2.
That's right.
I was like, what are we talking about here?
That was a special day for me, honestly, because I was pitching against you guys, and my shoulder was tore, and so was my elbow for the first time in my career. It was the first time I was starting to feel a little handicapped. But I was also pitching against a group of guys that I felt like I had raised in the game. And I hadn't had a smile on my face getting my butt kicked like that since I was 10 years old and pitching against my best friend who grew up next door to me in Little League. And that day was special. I gave up a grand slam in the first, I think, and you guys got on me pretty hard. Mesoraco hit that grand slam, but we came back and had a chance to win the game off a leak. And so it was a fun game, man. I'll never forget being on the mound that day and being like, man, I feel like I'm pitching against an entire cast of my best friends. And it was very unique.
Yeah, I felt like I was hitting off my dad, and I said I couldn't let this happen, man.
Beat him up without a shoulder.
Yeah, well,
he said he didn't have a shoulder.
I hit one right back at him too, which I felt bad. I remember you looked at me like, "Yo, what the heck?" And I'm sorry. I'm like, "My bad."
Yeah, and Mesoraco knew me so good from catching me, man. I threw him that first pitch curveball, and he just whacked it out of the park. But it was, yeah, I mean, that's probably the only time I could say I was having a good time getting my butt kicked on the mound. And that was a super, super fun day, man. And seeing you guys at the hotel, the next night was great. I was still missing playing in that uniform. I wanted to be a Cincinnati Red still at the time, and they just didn't want to sign me. And it was kind of a bummer that I was looking at you guys across the field thinking, man, I really enjoyed grinding with these guys for so many years.
Hey, well, congratulations on the Reds Hall of Fame. Congratulations on the album. Have fun watching the Red Legs because it's been a minute since they were putting together consistent winning like this. So it's cool to watch. Enjoy your time when you're visiting the ball club. And thanks for the time with us, man. Appreciate you.
Thanks,
yeah,
bro.
guys, man. Good stuff.
And you can catch all of the Legends Territory episodes on Foul Territory's YouTube channel or on Apple or on Spotify. And thanks to the MLB Players Alumni Association for putting all of this together. And for more information on your favorite players, hit up baseballalumni.com. We'll see you next time on Legends Territory.